Tonight, we descend into one of the most haunting and thought-provoking stories of Greek mythology, the tale of the Minotaur. At its surface, it is the story of a monster trapped in a maze, a hero who dares to face it, and the fragile thread that guides him home. But beneath the myth lies something deeper, questions about guilt and innocence, about power and punishment, about the monsters we create, and the ones we hide inside ourselves. The story begins not in the darkness of the Labyrinth, but in the shining halls of Knossos, the palace of King Minos on the island of Crete. Minos was a son of Zeus himself, a king who claimed his rule by divine favor. When he sought to prove that favor, he prayed to Poseidon, god of the sea, to send him a sign. Poseidon answered. From the waves emerged a magnificent white bull, a creature so perfect that it could only be a gift from the gods. The sign was clear. Minos was to sacrifice the bull back to Poseidon, honoring the god who gave it. But Minos hesitated. The bull was too beautiful, too rare. Instead of sacrificing it, he kept it for himself, substituting another animal in the offering. Here we see the first thread in the weaving of tragedy, a man who chose possession over piety. Minos believed he could outwit a god. But in Greek myth, the gods do not forget, and they never forgive deceit. Poseidon's anger did not strike Minos directly. Punishment came in a stranger, more insidious form. The goddess Aphrodite, at Poseidon's prompting, or perhaps out of her own mischievous cruelty, caused Minos' wife, Pasiphaë, to fall in unnatural love with the bull. Her desire was not her own, but a divine curse placed upon her. And so, Pasiphaë sought the aid of Daedalus, the master craftsman, whose genius would shape the course of the tale. She begged him to create a device that would allow her to fulfill the god-inflicted passion. Daedalus, loyal to the king but bound by his own art, built a hollow wooden cow. Pasiphaë climbed inside, and the bull, deceived, mated with her. From that union, half divine punishment, half human folly, was born the creature who would terrify generations, the Minotaur. Half man, half bull, a body twisted between two worlds, neither fully human nor fully beast. From his first breath, the Minotaur was a curse made flesh. He was not guilty of his birth, yet he bore the mark of shame. The Greeks called him Asterion, the Starry One, a name that hints at wonder, even majesty. But to most, he was only a monster. Pause for a moment, dear listener. Think of this. How often do we condemn others for what they are born into? How often does society brand someone a beast, not because of what they have done, but because of what they represent? The Minotaur's story is not just about a monster in a maze. It is about a child born of sin and punishment, forced to carry the burden of choices he never made. King Minos, ashamed of what had come to be, turned again to Daedalus. The craftsman built the Labyrinth, a prison of twisting corridors and endless passages where no man could find the way out once he had entered. Into this living puzzle the Minotaur was cast, hidden away from the eyes of the world. And so began the reign of terror. Minos fed the creature with flesh, demanded tribute from Athens, and used the Minotaur as both punishment and warning. The monster was not only a beast in a prison. He became the symbol of Minos' power, his secret shame made into a weapon. Here already the myth whispers to us, is the monster the Minotaur, or is it Minos himself? The creature never chose to be born, never chose the labyrinth, yet the king, fearing the truth, built walls not only around the beast, but around his own guilt. The curse of Crete was not just the birth of the Minotaur. It was the curse of pride, the refusal to honor the gods, the decision to conceal sin with walls instead of facing it. And as we follow this story deeper, we may begin to ask ourselves, what labyrinths do we build around the things we fear? What truths do we lock away, pretending that if they are hidden, they cannot harm us? Thus begins the tale of the Minotaur, Not in heroism, not in glory, but in deceit, desire, and divine wrath. From the union of hubris and punishment was born a creature who would haunt the corridors of myth, waiting for the day a hero would descend into the darkness to meet him. If the Minotaur was the curse made flesh, then the Labyrinth was the curse made stone. Few creations in all mythology capture the imagination as vividly as this maze. A place of twisting corridors, endless turns and paths that led always back upon themselves. To enter was to be lost, to wander without hope of escape. It was not only a prison, it was a mirror of the human soul. The architect of this wonder was Daedalus, a man as brilliant as he was tragic. In Greek myth, Daedalus stands as the archetype of invention itself. He was a master craftsman, a mind so sharp that kings and gods sought his works. But genius carries its own weight and often its own chains. When Minos demanded a prison for the Minotaur, Daedalus answered not with walls of iron, but with art. He built a structure alive with deception, a place where logic twisted into confusion, where the very act of walking became entrapment. The labyrinth was more than a building, it was an idea. Think of it, listener, a space without exit, where each decision leads only deeper into uncertainty. Is this not the experience of life itself? How often do we take turns, believing we are moving forward, only to find ourselves back where we began? How often do we feel trapped by the invisible walls of duty, fear, or desire? The labyrinth speaks to us because it is not only under Knossos, it is inside us. King Minos placed the Minotaur within this creation, sealing his shame away. But the labyrinth served another purpose. It concealed the truth from the people. A monster may be hidden, but fear can be fed. Minos used the beast to maintain power, to remind Athens of Crete's supremacy, to demand tribute in blood. The labyrinth was not only for the Minotaur, it was for the victim sent to die within it. And so Athens, once proud, bowed its head. Every 9 years, or some say every year, 7 young men and 7 maidens were sent across the sea, offered as sacrifice to the creature in the maze. Imagine their terror, stepping into the shadows of those walls, knowing that each path led only closer to the beast. The Minotaur did not need to hunt them. The labyrinth itself devoured their hope. But pause with me here. What does the labyrinth mean to us now? Perhaps it is the systems we live in, the endless bureaucracy, the machinery of power, the rules that trap us while pretending to guide us. Perhaps it is the mind itself, where doubts and fears twist into endless corridors, where we wander searching for clarity and find only more confusion. In every age, people have drawn their own labyrinths, and in every age they have sought a thread to escape them. Daedalus, the creator, understood this. He alone knew the map of his maze, and yet irony haunted him. He too would one day become a prisoner in Crete, trapped by the very king he served, forced to flee by wings of wax and feather. The labyrinth, it seems, consumes not only those who walk within its walls, but those who build it. The myth tells us something profound. When we try to hide our monsters, we build prisons that ensnare us as well. The labyrinth was not only a punishment for the Minotaur, it was a cage for all who touched it. Even Minos in his palace lived within its shadow, bound by the secret it contained. The image of the labyrinth has survived for millennia because it is not only architecture, it is philosophy. It is the structure of human struggle, the shape of our fears, the design of our choices. To step into it is to step into ourselves. And so the stage was set, a monster hidden, a maze unescapable, and a kingdom sustained by sacrifice. But myths never remain still, for somewhere far away, a city of mourning youth prepared to send its tribute once more. And among them was one who would not walk into the maze as a victim, but as a challenger. His name was Theseus. The labyrinth was silent stone, but its hunger was alive. To feed the Minotaur, King Minos demanded tribute from Athens, and in that demand lies one of the most painful truths of this myth: the suffering of the innocent. The story begins with grief. Minos' own son, Androgeus, had once traveled to Athens, where he triumphed in the Panathenaic Games. His victory stirred envy, and in the shadows of competition, the Athenians plotted against him. Some versions say he was murdered outright. Others claim he was sent to face the Marathonian bull, where he perished. Whatever the cause, the effect was the same. A prince of Crete was dead, and Minos' wrath fell upon Athens like a storm. In his vengeance, Minos waged war. Athens, weakened and desperate, could not resist his might. To end their suffering, they agreed to terms that would haunt them. Every cycle, some say every 9 years, others every year, Athens would send 7 young men and 7 maidens to Crete. They would walk into the labyrinth, and they would not return. Imagine the scene, dear listener. Athenian families watching as their children were chosen, their sons and daughters boarding ships under black sails. Their fate was not to be soldiers in war, but sacrifices to a monster in the dark. In the marketplace, whispers must have filled the air. Will it be my child next? The people of Athens lived under the shadow not only of Crete's power, but of the beast they would never see, yet could never escape. The tribute was more than punishment. It was humiliation. Every offering reminded Athens of its weakness, of its failure, of its submission to a foreign king. For Minos, this was not only vengeance, it was politics. By feeding the Minotaur with Athenian blood, he kept both his monster and his dominance alive. Pause and reflect. How many times in history have the young been sacrificed to sustain the pride of the powerful? How many wars, how many systems have consumed lives not for justice but for vengeance, not for necessity but for display? The labyrinth may be myth, but the tribute is real, replayed in every age where innocence pays the price of authority. And what of the Minotaur himself? Each youth, each maiden, was thrust into his prison as prey. The beast grew not only in size, but in legend. Was he feared as a creature of divine curse, or hated as a reminder of Crete's cruelty? We do not know. What we know is this: Athens wept, Crete triumphed, and the cycle repeated, until one year a prince of Athens stood among the chosen. His name was Theseus. To most, he was simply another victim. But in his heart, he carried a resolve that had never before entered the labyrinth. He would not be devoured. He would slay the beast. This moment marks the turning point of the tale, when the cycle of sacrifice meets the spark of defiance. Yet consider this: what drives a man to step into certain death with only hope as his shield? Is it bravery? Is it pride? Or is it the human refusal to accept a world where monsters rule unchecked? The tribute to the beast was a reminder of fear, but the choice of Theseus was a reminder of hope. And in mythology, it is always when fear and hope collide that the greatest stories are born. In Athens, grief had become ritual. Every cycle of tribute, black sails were raised, and families mourned children still alive. It was an endless rhythm of fear and resignation. But one year, the pattern broke. A young man of royal blood stepped forward and said, "I will go to Crete, and I will not go as prey." This man was Theseus, son of Aegeus, king of Athens. In some versions, he was also the son of Poseidon, god of the sea, carrying divine blood in his veins. Raised in Troezen and destined for greatness, Theseus had already proven himself in feats of strength and courage. He was no stranger to monsters. Along the roads to Athens, he had slain robbers, wrestled beasts, and cleared the land of threats. Each trial had shaped him into something more than a prince. He was an archetype, the hero in becoming. But the labyrinth was different. No one had ever returned. The monster was not only of flesh, but of myth, wrapped in fear and secrecy. Theseus's choice to volunteer was more than bravery. It was defiance. He would end the tribute. he would face the beast himself. His father, Aegeus, begged him not to go. But Theseus was resolute. Before he departed, he made a promise. If he triumphed, he would return with white sails on the ship. If he fell, the sails would remain black, a signal of grief. It was a simple gesture, but one that carried weight, for in this promise lay the bond between father and son, hope and despair. Pause here, listener, and consider. What does it mean to volunteer for death when others have only accepted it? Theseus's choice is the essence of heroism, not the certainty of victory, but the refusal to accept injustice as fate. Heroes are not born in safety. They are born in the moment when someone says, "No more." Theseus boarded the ship with the other chosen youths, their faces pale with fear. But where they trembled, he carried determination. To them, he was a companion in death. To himself, he was a hunter walking into the lair of prey. Such confidence is dangerous, but also necessary, for without it, no one would dare enter the darkness at all. And yet, the story reminds us, even heroes cannot succeed alone. Fate weaves allies into their path, threads of chance that change destiny. For on Crete, Theseus would meet Ariadne, daughter of Minos, who would see in him not another victim, but the possibility of freedom. But that is to come. For now we see the archetype forming. A young hero setting sail, defying the weight of tradition, ready to face the beast no one else dared challenge. Theseus is not just a character, he is a reflection of us when we decide to step into the labyrinth of our own fears. Remember this, the hero's choice is not about strength, it is about willingness to walk into the dark when all others turn away. And so, as the black-sailed ship left Athens, Theseus carried with him not only his own fate, but the hope of a city. The labyrinth waited, the Minotaur waited, and destiny sharpened its blade. Fate weaves its pattern in the most unlikely encounters. When Theseus arrived in Crete, he came not only as a warrior, but as a stranger in the palace of his enemy. King Minos saw him as yet another sacrifice to the beast beneath the earth. But in the eyes of Ariadne, daughter of Minos and Pasiphaë, Theseus was something else entirely. Ariadne looked upon him and felt the stirrings of love, or perhaps of destiny. Ancient storytellers disagree. Was it Aphrodite who lit that flame in her heart, guiding her to aid the hero? Or was it her own choice, born of compassion and courage? Whatever the cause, Ariadne resolved to help Theseus, for without her, he would enter the labyrinth as all others had, doomed. She knew the truth. The labyrinth was not merely stone corridors. It was Daedalus's masterpiece, designed to confuse, to trap, to destroy hope itself. Even the strongest warrior, blade in hand, would wander until exhaustion claimed him, long before the Minotaur's roar echoed through the halls. Theseus's courage was not enough. He needed a guide. So Ariadne gave him one. A simple thing, yet timeless. A ball of thread. She told him to tie it at the entrance and unwind it as he walked, so that he might find his way back from the twisting dark. A thread, thin, fragile, breakable, became the weapon stronger than sword or spear. Pause here, listener, and reflect. How often in our lives do we face labyrinths of our own, confusing paths, endless choices, places where every turn feels the same? And how often do we long for a thread, something simple to guide us back to light? Ariadne's gift is more than myth. It is a symbol of memory, of reason, of hope, the fragile line we cling to when all else is shadow. But her gift was not without price. Ariadne asked Theseus for his love in return. She wanted not only to save him, but to join him, to leave Crete and its cruel labyrinth behind. Perhaps she dreamed of a new life, far from her father's wrath, far from the beast hidden beneath the palace. Perhaps she believed that love, like the thread, could guide her to freedom. Theseus accepted, and with thread in hand, he prepared to descend. The other Athenian youths looked to him with fear and hope. Could one man truly defy the Minotaur? Could a ball of thread truly defeat the darkness? And yet, that is the mystery of symbols. Their strength lies not in their material, but in their meaning. Ariadne's thread has endured across centuries because it speaks to something universal. In every confusion, in every maze of the mind or heart, we long for something simple and sure. A thread to follow, a promise that we are not lost. That night, as Theseus entered the labyrinth, the thread unwound behind him, delicate, shining, invisible in the dark, yet unbreakable in its purpose. A man walked into the maze, a monster waited within, and love in the form of a thread connected them all. The labyrinth swallowed Theseus as it had swallowed so many before. Stone walls rose high around him, passages twisted in endless circles, and silence pressed down like a weight. Only the faint scrape of his sandals and the steady unwinding of Ariadne's thread reminded him that he was still moving, still alive. Behind him stretched a fragile path of hope. Before him waited the monster. The Minotaur had lived his life in darkness. Half man, half bull, he was neither one thing nor the other. To some, he was Asterion, the starry one. To most, he was simply the beast. He had been born of punishment, hidden in shame, and sustained by blood. Imagine his existence. No sky above, no companionship, no freedom, only stone, shadow, and the taste of flesh. Was it cruelty that made him a monster, or was he condemned from the moment of his birth? Theseus pressed on, torchlight flickering against the walls. The air grew heavier, the silence deeper. Then came the sound, distant at first, then closer, the low, guttural roar of the Minotaur. Not the cry of an animal, nor the voice of a man, but something in between, a sound that belonged to no world. The battle that followed is told in many ways. Some say Theseus surprised the beast while it slept, crushing its skull with his club. Others say he faced it in combat, wrestling it with his bare hands before striking it down. Still others imagine sword against horn, torch against claw, a struggle of light and shadow. Whatever the version, one truth remains. In the darkness of the labyrinth, man and monster met, and only one walked out. But pause with me here. Was the Minotaur evil, or simply abandoned? Did Theseus slay a monster, or did he kill a prisoner who had never been given a choice? Myth rarely answers such questions. It only presents them, leaving us to wrestle with their weight. For Theseus, the act was victory. The roar fell silent, the shadow was gone. With Ariadne's thread, he retraced his steps, torch burning low until at last he emerged into the night. The other youths, waiting in terror, saw him return not as victim, but as savior. The labyrinth which had devoured so many had been conquered. And yet triumph is never pure. The Minotaur was dead, but at what cost? A life born of curse and cruelty had ended, and Theseus himself, though hailed as a hero, would soon find that victory does not always bring peace. Still, in that moment, Athens was avenged. The tribute was ended. The monster lay slain in the shadows of his prison, and a prince had proven himself a hero. But myths are not only about victories, they are about what comes after. Theseus had won, yes, but as he left Crete, guided not only by courage but by love, another story was already weaving itself. A story of betrayal, of abandonment, and of grief. For Ariadne had given him the thread, and with it her heart. And heroes, like kings, are not always faithful. The ship sailed away from Crete under the cover of night, its sails filled with the promise of freedom. On board, Theseus stood tall, hero, victor, liberator. Around him, the rescued youths of Athens whispered in awe, their terror turned to relief. And beside him was Ariadne, the daughter of Minos, who had risked everything for him. She had betrayed her father, forsaken her kingdom, and placed her hope in the hands of a stranger. She had given him not only the thread that saved his life, but her heart. To Ariadne, the voyage was not an escape, but the beginning of a new life. She had chosen love over duty, Theseus over Crete, hope over fear. For a time, the journey must have seemed like a dream, but dreams are fragile, and heroes are not always kind. The ship stopped at the island of Naxos, a place of quiet shores and whispering winds. Here, Ariadne slept, perhaps weary from her choices, perhaps dreaming of Athens and the life awaiting her. And when she awoke, she was alone. Theseus had gone, the sails of his ship vanishing on the horizon. The myth does not tell us why. Some say Theseus abandoned her out of cold calculation, no longer needing her. Others suggest he feared bringing a foreign princess into Athens. Still others whisper that the gods themselves commanded it, that Dionysus desired Ariadne for his own. Whatever the cause, the effect was the same. The woman who had given everything was left with nothing. Pause here, listener, and reflect. How often in our lives do we see this story repeat? Someone who gives their heart, their trust, their sacrifices, only to be abandoned when they are no longer useful. The tale of Ariadne is not only myth, it is the story of love betrayed, of loyalty unreturned. Yet her story did not end in despair. On Naxos, Ariadne was found by Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, and rebirth. He took her as his bride, crowned her with a diadem of stars, and lifted her into divinity. Betrayed by a hero, she was embraced by a god. Perhaps there is a lesson here, that what feels like the end may, in time, reveal itself as the beginning of something greater. For Theseus, however, Ariadne's absence left a shadow on his triumph. A hero may slay a monster, but he cannot escape the consequences of his choices. His betrayal would follow him, as surely as the thread had once guided him. The labyrinth was behind him, the Minotaur slain. But the true maze, the labyrinth of the human heart, was far more difficult to escape. The ship left Naxos and sailed toward Athens, but the air aboard was heavy. Theseus had won glory, yes. He had slain the Minotaur, freed the youths, and broken the chains of tribute. Yet victories in myth are rarely clean. Behind him lay a trail of shadows, Ariadne abandoned, her thread repaid with betrayal. Ahead of him waited a fate he could not foresee. As the coast of Attica drew near, the cliffs rising above the sea, Theseus forgot, or perhaps neglected, the promise he had made to his father, Aegeus. Before leaving Athens, he had sworn to hoist white sails if he returned victorious, black sails if he had perished. It was a simple sign, a thread of hope for a waiting father. But Theseus, distracted by triumph or grief, left the black sails unfurled. From the heights of Cape Sunion, Aegeus watched the horizon. Day after day he scanned the sea, longing for his son's return. And then, at last, he saw the ship. Black sails flapped in the wind, stark against the sky. To the old king, the meaning was clear. His son was dead. Overcome with sorrow, Aegeus threw himself into the waves, his life ending in the waters that now bear his name, the Aegean Sea. When Theseus stepped ashore, he found not celebration, but tragedy. He had returned a hero, but his victory had cost him his father. In one careless moment, triumph turned to mourning. Theseus took the throne of Athens, but it was a throne won through both courage and loss. Pause here, listener, and consider the weight of promises. How often do we, like Theseus, forget the small signs we owe to those who love us most? How often does neglect, whether by accident or pride, bring sorrow greater than any monster's roar? The story of Theseus reminds us that heroism is not only about slaying beasts. It is about remembering the ties that bind us, fathers, mothers, lovers, friends. To conquer the labyrinth but lose those bonds is a hollow victory. And so Theseus stood as king, crowned not only by his deeds but by the grief that came with them. The Minotaur was dead, the tribute ended, but the cost was written in the sea itself. The myth of the Minotaur does not end with celebration. It ends with a reminder, even the brightest victories cast shadows, and often those shadows fall not on enemies but on those we love. The story of the Minotaur is often told as the tale of a hero's triumph, a beast slain, a city freed, a king's son crowned. But myths are never so simple. They linger because they are mirrors. And when we look into this one, we see more than a monster in a maze. We see ourselves. The Minotaur was born of hubris and curse, hidden away because his very existence was shameful. Yet was he evil or only condemned? How many of us carry burdens not of our own making? Wounds inherited, expectations imposed, walls built around us by others. The Minotaur reminds us that sometimes the monsters we fear are not villains, but victims of a story written before they could choose their part. And the labyrinth, what is it if not life itself? Endless corridors of choice, paths that circle back upon themselves, walls that seem to close us in. We wander through it every day, searching for purpose, for exit, for light. Some are lost, some turn back. Some, like Theseus, move forward, thread in hand, daring to face what waits in the dark. And what of Ariadne's thread? A ball of simple string, fragile yet unbreakable in meaning, it has become one of the most enduring symbols in human culture. For we all need a thread to guide us. Love, faith, memory, hope. Something that ties us to the entrance, to the promise of return. Without it, the maze is only despair. With it, even the deepest corridors may lead back to the light. But the story also warns us, victory is never pure. Heroes betray, promises are forgotten, triumphs are shadowed by loss. To slay the Minotaur is not the end, but only one turn in the greater labyrinth of human life. And perhaps that is why this myth still haunts us. It is not only about courage, but about consequence. So listener, as you rest tonight, consider this. What Minotaur waits within your own labyrinth? What fears, what secrets, what inherited curses stand in the dark, waiting for you to face them? And what thread will you carry, fragile but strong, to guide you back again? This is the gift of myth, not answers but questions, not simple endings, but mirrors in which we find our own reflection. Thank you for walking this path with me. If this story has stirred something in you, I invite you to share it in the comments below. Do you see yourself in the hero, the princess, the king, or the monster? Every perspective matters. Every voice is another thread through the maze. And now, may you drift into sleep with these echoes in your mind. May your dreams be free of labyrinths, or if you find yourself in one, may you also find the thread that leads you home. Good night.